You're listening to the DVM Podcast Empire.
Now with over 1 million downloads.
1 million downloads.
Find us online at DVMPE.com.
100% free.
1,000,000% fan.
And now,
Push the button.
Is it possible that we have permitted ideology, political and economic philosophies, and governmental policies to keep us from considering the very real, everyday problems of our people?
So what if my feelings are hurt? Does that give me the right to prevent others from expressing their opinions?
Wait a second, Doc. Are you telling me that this sucker is nuclear?
Hey, can you push the button?
Do not touch that button.
Hey, can you push the button?
Do not touch that button.
Hey, can you push the button?
Do not touch that button.
Mr. Anderson.
Don't push it.
Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of Push the Button, your hot button topic podcast, where we talk about all the stuff that gets you hot. But I'm not the only one. I'm David Vox Mullen.
And I'm your other host, Mr. Anderson.
And boy, are we hot. Okay, so we haven't talked for about a week, and it seems like within the matter of a week, the world exploded.
Yeah, it did.
Just a jillion different things have happened, and we just felt like, okay, seeing as how we're now the entertainment authority on all things controversial, we should talk about some of this stuff.
It seems funny to me because everything goes in cycles, right?
It really does.
You get periods of just absolutely nothing, and all they can talk about is Miley Cyrus and crap like that.
Yeah.
Or what Justin Bieber's up to, what the Kardashians are doing.
You mean you cast Ben Affleck as Batman? What?
Yeah, right. And then we just suddenly get this string of events that blows up.
Yeah.
And we had a number of these things blow up in the last few days. The first that I would like to talk about is this the beheading of James Wright Foley, the American journalist.
Yes.
Over in Iraq. He was captured by ISIL or ISIS, whatever you want to call them.
Well, ISIS was the name, although I heard a rumor recently that I think they're now being called something else. And I'm an idiot for not remembering what it was. But now, supposedly there's like another name that they're calling the group, but basically it's ISIS. And for those who don't know what ISIS is, it's basically Taliban and Al-Qaeda on speed.
It's actually an offshoot of Al-Qaeda.
Yeah.
I believe it started out that way, and then Al-Qaeda, within the last year, just fully denounced them, saying that they were too brutal. And
you guys are too terroristy for our terrorist organization.
Yeah, yes, which really says something. These are bad people. These are just bad people.
I don't mean to laugh. I'm not making fun of it. It's just it's one of those things where I've gotten to the point where it's almost comical at this point. It's like this is so ridiculous, the way in which they operate.
Yeah, I would tend to agree with you. And I know you wanted to sort of steer away from the religion, but I'm going to bring it right back.
Well, at least you're not making fun of my God this time, so go right ahead.
Well, they're the same God, though.
Right? Oh, I know. That's right. Well, yeah.
So the thing is that these people are doing all of this based on a book written by a dude 1,500 years ago. And the thing is people always say that, these extremists, they're misinterpreting the Quran. They're taking it out of context. These are the absolute extremists. Well, actually, if you read the Quran, this stuff is in there. It's in there. It's in the Quran. It's in the Sunnah. These were both written by Muhammad, who is regarded as the last prophet by Muslims.
He's like the Jesus of the Muslims.
Yeah. So, he invented these laws. He laid down the excessive and barbaric punishments that are issued to people. This Sharia law, which is what these ISIL members are trying. That basically they're targeting Shias, Assyrians, Christians, Jews, Yazidis, etc., so on and so forth. They want to enforce Sharia law, which basically says that homosexuals should be killed, that you can beat your wife for any imagined or perceived offense. If you sense that your wife is becoming a little too upper-handed, I believe is what it says in the Quran, actually, you can beat her. Just go ahead and hit her. They allow child marriages in certain circumstances. A woman's testimony is only worth half of a man's in court. Rape is illegal, but the rapist is sometimes allowed to go free allowed to escape punishment by marrying his victim.
I've heard that one, yeah.
Which is actually in the Bible too. Women are only entitled to half the property that the males are entitled to, which is also, I believe, in the Bible, or at least women's testimony is worth half of what a man's is in court, and a woman is worth only a small fraction of what a man is as far as when they're allowed to sell their slaves, and so on and so forth. These laws were invented by Muhammad. He laid down the punishment that people receive for committing these offenses. So that's what these people are out there doing.
Yeah, and much like a lot of Christian whack jobs, I think what we're dealing with is an organized group of people who are using the direct dialogue from the Quran. And again, I'm not a Muslim scholar, so I don't even begin to pretend to know. I know I need to be more educated.
Yeah, I know nothing. I mean,
but
all I know is that I know nothing.
Right. But Socrates. But I feel like this is just another group of people who are using bits and pieces from the text of the Quran to justify their human desire to be just freaking terrible.
But they truly believe this stuff. This isn't...
yeah. I mean, I'm not saying they don't.
They're not following this stuff because it makes me feel good to beat my wife.
Right. No, like they would say, I really believe that you believe this stuff.
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah, I definitely get behind that.
And why do you suppose that is? Why do you suppose they have these beliefs? Where do these beliefs come from? Where?
I think it's a mixture of trying to understand that this is a tough one, bro, because I don't know enough of the history. And I wish we could find somebody who could, as open-headedly as we do, discuss this, but I think it's going to be pretty difficult. And if you are somebody who can open-mindedly talk about it, send us an email at pushthebuttonpodcast@gmail.com on either side of the equation. But I think for me, and I could be wrong, I feel like this is a people who feel like they've been oppressed, whether it's by, you go all the way back to Abraham and Ishmael and being cast out and having to fend for themselves on their own, not being included with the Jewish people. It could be them feeling like it's their rightful claim to the land, which gets you into a whole nother conversation, but just feeling like they've been kept underfoot. And the only way, like many quote-unquote terrorist organizations operate, they come from the position of, the only way to make a change is by violence. And, and that could include, the IRA. That could include, Al-Qaeda and the Taliban and any other terrorist organization from Lebanon or Syria or whatever. You've got Dr. Martin Luther King, who's all about nonviolence to make a change, and then you've got somebody who's like, let's blow up a building to make our point. There's a huge stark contrast to that type of behavior, and I'm always of the mindset that when you do immediate violence as a show of trying to get your point across. To me, it's like, yeah, it's hot, yeah, it's sensational, but nobody talks about it after a short period of time. And that's what's frustrating me. I don't know if you remember, I think it was earlier this year, there was a beheading in London. I don't know if you remember that. It was like in the streets of London. It was an Islamic radical who beheaded a civilian right there in the streets, and nobody did anything about it. They just, kind of let it happen. And it was tragic. It was all over the news, and nobody talks about it anymore. Mm-hmm. And again, I'm not glorifying it. I'm just saying, yeah, it's hot and popular at the moment, but then nobody thinks about it. Nobody talks about it. Then when it also I think when it comes time to take action, people forget. Yeah. Oh, yeah. I mean, let's withdraw troops from Iraq. Right?
Which I go back and forth on this issue, and hindsight is always 20/20, obviously. But sure. Looking back, should we have ever gone into Iraq in the first place? We as I said last on one of our previous podcasts, I don't believe that us as a nation, the United States, or any of our allies for that matter, have what it takes, or maybe that's putting it poorly, but are willing to do what is necessary to make positive, permanent change to that region. I think
what do you think it would
going
take?
In there and I read a book a few years ago called House to House. I can't remember the name of the author. It was a great book. It was a former Marine or Army member, armed services member who had fought in Iraq, and basically said that the reason that all of our people were getting killed and maimed were because they were being forced to go house to house and look for these people because they blend in. They don't stand out on the street. They don't, ISIS is not setting up bases.
Yeah, nobody fights a war the way they used to anymore.
Right. And the thing is they don't follow the Geneva Conventions. I believe that under the Geneva Conventions, it is illegal to just execute a prisoner without some sort of.
Yeah, I mean, but there's that, and I know why you're saying these points, so I get it. But at the same time, there's that part of me that says, okay, but do you really expect a terrorist organization who is not an official recognized military to operate under the laws of the Geneva Convention during warfare? Do you know what I mean?
Are they, and there's another, you bring up an interesting point. The word terrorist, what does that mean anymore? We just toss that, I feel like we sort of toss that word around.
Yeah, we do. Because of global war on terror.
Because do terrorists go in and take over entire countries? Do they take over cities?
Well,
I don't know.
Rebellions do.
Right, and those rebellions become militaries, become governments, become, civilizations.
So here we go. Like you said, should we have ever really gone in? And okay, so initially we were in there in the 90s because of Saddam Hussein invading Kuwait, and our job was to push the Iraqis out of Kuwait, off the border, stay away from the Kuwaitis, and we liberated Kuwait. That was what the official mission was, as far as I can remember. I was a young guy. I know you and I are kind of the same in age, so we were probably similar. And it was a very interesting time, man. CNN full-time coverage. It was the first time we ever saw, the actual ground fighting live on 24-hour news access, and it was the night vision shots of the chaser rounds or whatever they called them, when you can tracer rounds and you could see them going over. And I was as a kid, I was like, wow, this is amazing. Didn't know why the hell we were there. All we knew is, as a young kid, Saddam Hussein is bad. What did HW call him? Saddam Hussein. He's bad. And
Rocky's bad too.
And, you know, it's one of those things where it's, okay, so he's the bad guy. So we beat his forces out of Kuwait. Do we stop him? No. We just get him out of Kuwait. And I know that while I'm sure there were plenty of Kuwaitis who were appreciative to America for helping them get the Iraqi forces out of Kuwait, I'm sure there was a ton of them who were going, where are you going? Why are you leaving? What's going on? And we left. And I'm sure that there were still a presence there, obviously. But for the most part, we were like, okay, we're done. We didn't kill Saddam Hussein. We didn't stop them. We didn't topple their government. We just said, okay, you can't do this bad. Shame on you. Smack the hand. Give us our gas. So, well, I mean, I was not political one way or the other during the early 90s, and it was just, that's what everybody was saying. It was all
everybody's always said that we went over there for the oil. We went over there for, you know, first of all, we have so much oil in this country and in Canada and Alaska. We get 93% of our oil from the United States, Canada, and Mexico.
See, that needs to be made more clear, because I was not under that impression. In fact, I was under the...
There's so much oil in Missouri. There are states that are untapped.
See, I was under the impression, dude, that we can't get our hands on some of our oil.
Well, we can't get our hands on some of our oil because our politicians won't allow us to go into these areas and tap those resources.
Okay, that's probably...
But we still get 90 to 93% of our oil from right here, Mexico and Canada. That's where
I just remember being in, I want to say, 8th grade and watching a channel, like a PBS Nova special on how Saddam's forces blew all these oil rigs, and the U.S. soldiers were going in to kind of knock out the fires, the oil fires.
Right.
And it was like, well, why are they doing that? Well, you know, the allegation was that it was, you know, we really wanted that oil to be free flowing. I don't know. If I was a capitalist, I'd say let them burn and buy it from us, but whatever. But, okay, so we did all that. We left, whatever, blah, 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 blah. Then, you know, a decade later, we hear, you know, planes flying into buildings in New York City, and we're going after Osama bin Laden. Literally, within 24 hours, we had the name and the picture of the guy in the news, which I always thought was a little shady.
Yes.
Like, we know who it is that quickly, really. Although knowing what we know now, yeah, I get it. But with the NSA and all that stuff that we've been doing. But then it was, let's go.
Interestingly, like, what was it? How many people were on those planes? 19 hijackers?
I don't know.
All from Saudi Arabia.
Yeah, I don't remember the specifics, but.
All from Saudi Arabia, all highly educated, rich.
Yeah. That's definitely another podcast, dude.
No, but then we go into Iraq, and
Yeah. Well, we were going into Afghanistan, and then it was we have evidence that there's weapons of mass destruction there.
Well, and from what I remember, it was, and this was why I was on board with it, was because at some point President Bush stood in front of the nation and the rest of the world and said, declared a war on terrorism. And basically said that if you harbor terrorists in your country, if you threaten us in any way, I mean, Osama bin Laden had threatened us multiple times, had carried out some attacks throughout. I think one of the attacks was the first World Trade Center bombing, if I'm not mistaken.
A few years earlier.
It was the same group.
Yeah.
It was like in the early 90s, I think.
Yeah.
And basically, you know, and almost immediately after Bush said those, and basically he said, like, if you harbor terrorists in your country, if you subscribe to their beliefs, if you threaten us, we're going to come kick your ass.
Yeah.
And, like, the day after, Saddam said, I totally support what Osama bin Laden did or whoever did these attacks.
Yeah.
2, I would do it to you, too. 3, Osama bin Laden, if you're hearing this, you can come live in my country. Basically did all the things that Bush told him not to do. So, And now looking back,
kind of like what Putin is doing to Obama now, but that's a whole other story.
Was he being led? You know, did Bush lead him, or did the powers that be at that time sort of know that?
No, because W didn't say, "Hey, Saddam, you know, I'm saying this to the world, but, you know, are you listening?" No, Saddam was an idiot. Yeah, right. There's no doubt there. But anyway, so yeah, I remember that. There was a bunch of SNL sketches about how Osama bin Laden and Saddam were talking to each other on the phone, and it was just ridiculousness. But yeah, so I remember the whole, you know, bringing it to the Congress, the evidence that we have, you know, satellite footage of all these weapon caches and these, you know, obvious chemical weapons that Saddam had, and you know, stories and rumors of the atrocities that he's doing to the people there, and the mass graves and all that stuff. So, you know, it was kind of one of those things where we know the guy's crazy. Look at the way he's behaving on the world stage. He's clearly crazy. He's got access to you know, chemical weapons, possibly nuclear weapons. We need to stop this guy.
Well, he had used them on the Kurds at one time.
Right.
Yeah,
so, yeah, so
here's a guy that says, "Hey, I'm willing to do all these things," and historically, we know that he not only has the capability, but he is willing to do it, and he says he's going to do it again.
Now, there are schools of thought and HBO miniseries that have been made that make it look like Saddam was acting out of desperation and fear of looking weak to the other countries surrounding him. But that's a really bad way to play it.
Then why don't you call Bush on the phone and say, "Hey, psst, here's the deal.
I'll talk some shit."
You know, I'm sorry. Like, I don't know. I've always thought that, like, if you're walking on the street and you see a cop walking a beat, and you quickly put your hand in your pocket, or you put your hand in your jacket like you're reaching for a gun, and you tell the cop, "I've got a gun and I'm going to pull it out and shoot you," what is that cop going to do?
Right.
He's going to pull out his gun.
Right.
He's
Exactly.
going to point it at you. He's going to put his finger on the trigger, and he's going to say, "Don't move. Take your hands out slowly." And when you make a quick, sudden movement and that cop shoots you, and you pull out a water pistol,
that's on you.
Whose fault is that?
Yeah,
exactly.
No, that's on you. And I get that. So, yeah, I mean, I don't think anybody listening to this is going to go, "You know, that Saddam, he wasn't such a bad dude." No, he was a piece of crap. Well, yeah, you're right. Some people might. And you can email us at pushthe-button-podcast@gmail.com. So here's my thing. Yeah, I'm going to whore that out this episode. So here's my thing. So we go in, and allegedly we can't seem to find these weapons of mass destruction. After the whole UN inspectors were turned away a bunch of times. It's just Saddam was shady. We go in there, and let's just be honest, we just went in there and just lit up the country. I mean, we just lit it up. We went in there, we entered the borders, and we got to Baghdad, like, I think it was like in 3 days.
Shock and awe, bro.
It was unbelievable. And, you know, we were there. And then it became, you know, this whole thing. And I had tons of friends who were serving over there, God bless them. And it was one of those things where, you know, there's that fine line between, okay, now we're here, now what? You know, and then they capture Saddam. And then it's, you know, a whole other rigmarole of putting him on trial and all that. Yet all the while, we're there acting in a support capacity, as it was commonly referred to. But for the most part, Iraq was really, I know people are going to disagree with me, but I believe that Iraq was really kind of on its way to becoming a successful nation. On its way. It wasn't perfect. It still had a lot of problems. But for the most part, they were getting it. They were figuring things out. They were working on their own democracy. They were working on their voting. They were working on their governing. It was happening. I wouldn't be surprised if America had their fingers in something somehow, you know, pulling strings. But that's just how we operate. And then all of a sudden, you know, Obama's big, you know, campaign trail was, we're going to get everybody out of Iraq, we're going to get everybody out of Afghanistan, blah, 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 blah. And I kept saying while he was running, okay, yeah, that's all nice, but what happens when you get in there and realize, oh, crap, we can't get out? And that's exactly what happened to him. He was in, and he didn't even pull troops out until his second term. What if he didn't get elected again? But he pulls his troops out this term, and like clockwork, the big bad just swooped in. There was a power vacuum.
The next day, I believe.
Yeah, I mean, it's just.
There were two men. I'm going to butcher this, but there were two men in power, like the president and the vice president, and they had differing faiths. One was a Sunni and the other a Shiite,
right.
And the one immediately put out like a death warrant for his vice president.
Yeah.
The day after we pulled out.
Yeah.
Something to that effect.
Which meant we were trying to keep things democratic. Yeah, it's tough because, there's the power vacuum and then boom, it's just whoever's more willing to take the risk, history is written by the winners, as we say. So they take over all these areas and, and again, I mentioned Baghdad. To me, Baghdad was such a monumental achievement. That, as was Fallujah, as was, a couple other areas. But seeing these areas where, American soldiers laid their lives down to acquire safely.
Yeah.
And to have that stripped away.
So quickly.
Oh my gosh. I was seeing red. I mean, I was so full of anger and it's hurt. It's heartache. That fueled my anger. It was like, we wept and we yelled and we screamed and we protested and we, it's like we've all forgotten. I remember, people who didn't want us to go to war. There were people in the streets of Chicago and in New York and everywhere else protesting. I mean, this was a big deal. And it was just literally, I don't even want to say it was thrown away, but it was like every gain we had was lost in an instant. And I wanted to make a point to say, look, there were people who gave their lives for those territories, and what do they get now? You know what I mean?
Right.
And that's infuriating to me. Now we take that into today. Well, a couple of days ago, I admittedly I'm usually really good about keeping up with current events. Admittedly, this week and last week I was a little running, a little crazy. But I have my AP alerts that hit my phone, and I kept seeing, President Obama's going to speak on the situation in Iraq, and there's an American journalist who's been kidnapped, and so I was seeing these things come in, but I wasn't aware of the specifics of any of the cases. And then I guess when was it the other night, Obama came out and spoke after the beheading, and.
Yeah.
And it was just one of these things where, again, there's some people who are going to be fans of Bush. There's some people who are totally fans of Obama, and I get that. I get that. But again, like the Martin Luther King analogy, there's a stark contrast to the way that W approached this type of situation verbally and the way Obama is doing it. And it seemed to me from the press conference that he gave, he was just like, this is a terrible thing.
I got to go golf.
Yeah.
8 minutes after he gave that press conference, he was on the golf course. 8.
Well, and this is, I don't want to turn this.
This means that man was changing virtually the minute that he stepped off the second he stepped off that stage, he was changing into his khakis, his golf shoes, his golf hat, and his golf shirt, put on his golf glove. I mean, you talk about the differences between Bush and Obama. And to be honest with you, I don't like either one of them.
Sure.
Or I have significant disagreements with both.
Well, before you finish your point and hang on to it.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
That's okay. I want to play devil's advocate for a minute here because I know for a fact that there was a lot of press, because there's a lot of people who are screaming this at their iPods or their stereos right now. I remember that there was a big hubbub about Bush as well going golfing during.
Absolutely, there was, and he made a huge gaffe. He said something, and then he said, "Now watch me hit this drive."
Right.
And he turned around and it looked so just insensitive.
But you'd think that the current administration would have remembered that.
Well, and not only that, but he immediately looked at his whole he quit golfing for the rest of his presidency. He stopped golfing.
I didn't know that.
Period. He said, you know what? This just looks bad if I'm out golfing and this kind of stuff is going on. And we've got men and women that I put over there in harm's way, dying. You know, the difference between President Bush and Obama was President Bush he knew the names of all the service members that were killed every day. Like, he would have a list put on his desk every day. These are the guys that lost their lives. And he would know their names. He would send letters to family members that he would sign personally. Yeah. Obama puts a freaking rubber stamp on it. It's not even him signing. It's a form letter. You know, there was I believe a helicopter of 6 Navy SEALs that went down a few years ago. Mm-hmm. And they all got these are Navy SEALs. They got form letters with a rubber stamp on it. Barack Obama, he didn't even take the time to actually sign it, to read the damn thing and sign it himself.
Yeah.
I don't know, appearances alone. A lot of us believe that the president is sort of a puppet anyways, that he's sort of a figurehead in a lot of ways. There are other people that are pulling the strings. He can't possibly know everything that goes on in the government at once. He just can't do it.
Sure. Watch House of Cards and you get it.
He's the spokesperson for all those things.
Yeah.
But politics is about perception, and perception is reality.
Well, and if you are going to be the spokesperson, and I don't care if you want to be the spokesperson, then be the spokesperson, but represent us.
Yeah.
Because that's not happening. And I don't want to turn this into a Bash Obama podcast.
No.
It's just that, unfortunately, when it comes down to matters of national and international security, this party tends to be a little behind the ball when things like this happen. I'm not vouching for one party or another. I'm just saying, it just tends to be the way it is. When you get a Republican in office, they want to put all the money into military spending. And when you get a Democrat in the office, the first thing they want to do is cut all the military spending. And it's like, okay, we get it. You don't like to fight. and we get it. You love to fight. So it's so tough. But and there really does. There comes a point when you have to say, yes, it's time to defend ourselves. Yes, it's time to stand up for somebody else. Yes, no, it's time to stand still. No, it's time to shut up. And
that's why I think it's time to get a libertarian in office.
Well, Rand Paul's doing pretty good. Rand Paul's doing pretty good.
I personally am done supporting. I voted for Bush both times.
I get it.
I voted for Bush both times.
Most libertarians I know did too.
I would say that I regret it. However, the options that I had on the table at that time.
Sure.
I gotta say, I think that I picked the better of those options.
Well, let's see. How did Kerry behave in Israel?
Refresh my memory.
He went over there to talk peace with them and basically was laughed off the country. Secretary of State John Kerry. He went over to Israel during the Gaza-Israel fighting, and they sent him over there to talk, peace plan, and they basically just said that he was an idiot, and he kind of came home with his tail between his legs. And I was thinking, wow, this was the guy who almost could have been president of the United States.
Yeah. The other option you had was Al Gore. No.
And I'll say this: if the Al Gore that I've met today was the Al Gore that was running in 2000, he might have had a better lead. You know what I mean? I think it may have been a stronger lead. He seems much more down to earth now than he was when he was, I created the internet. It's like,
this is the guy that just purchased Al Jazeera.
Well, yeah, now there's that.
The company the news organization that assisted Al Qaeda and other militant groups to display video of Americans being dragged through the streets, bodies being dragged through the streets, beheadings, these kinds of things. This is
Well, again, you get into a whole new level of news ethics. Again, and I'm not here to defend or bash Al Jazeera. I know that they were also showing, American victories as well. But it's one of those things where there is that level of, do we show a great example is, this poor American journalist, James Foley, who, there's video. It's out there. If you really want to know it, you can find it. And,
Did you happen to see the video?
I literally have it right here on my screen, but I don't want to hit play. I don't want to watch it.
Yeah, just to cut. I don't mean to cut you off, but
that's okay.
I just happened to yesterday morning. I watched the video.
Yeah,
and it's the video actually never. I believe what they're saying is that this group, this ISIL, never released the actual beheading.
Okay.
Well, it's the same thing. ISIS. It's the Iraqi state of the Islamic State of Iraq and the Levant, which is like Jordan, Syria, whatever. But basically, they're saying that this group did not actually release footage of the beheading taking place. The video basically has James Foley on his knees. The pictures that they've been flashing
guys,
on television,
the pictures on the news today with him,
wearing the orange garb,
yeah,
on his knees with his hands cuffed behind his back, a man standing over him with a hood and a knife, and the video that I saw, James Foley basically you can tell he's reading off of cue cards, and he's basically saying that Americans are what caused my death, denouncing America, and then this man standing over him basically calls out President Obama, calls out America, says this blood is on your hands, and then he moves. He actually puts his hand over his face, over his chin, and you see the knife come to his throat, and then that's where the video ends. Mm-hmm. And from what I've read, apparently the next shot you see is of a head on top of a headless orange garbed body. Basically.
See, and this to me, he wasn't a soldier.
Right.
He wasn't, not that it's right, but he wasn't even, there representing the military. He was there representing the press.
Yeah. And
to me, that is just so, I don't care who you are. That's just not okay. Beheading anybody is not okay anyway, but.
Right.
But.
Well, the manner in which they do it too, I mean, it's just such a horrific death. I mean, it's not a slow, quick, you picture a beheading, somebody leaning over a chopping block and basically one swoop and you're done. They use a short knife and they take their time and they make sure that it's painful and disgusting and brutal, and because they know the way that we feel about these things. As
I say, as is the custom for the majority of their actions that are deemed terroristic. I mean, it's what they do. It's how they operate. I mean, not to get way off, but the Gaddafi situation when they grabbed him and they just, I mean, I remember seeing the footage of him and the people were just basically ravaging his body.
They were, and while he was still alive too. I mean,
that's what I mean. Like, you could literally see the moment when he was gone, and it's one of those things where it's like there's something about that desert area that these people are just so violent and brutal.
And I asked you earlier, I said, where do you think this stuff comes from?
Yeah.
And I was sort of leading you. And I have a hunch. That it stems from training these kids from the time that they can remember that this is how we behave.
This
is right. And this book is correct in its teachings, and we have the correct assumptions, and we have the correct translations, and that's the thing. These people don't even read. A lot of them don't read. They're just told what to believe. They're told this is what our book says.
And I've heard from people who have come out of those countries, have come to America, have Americanized, and have told the horrors of. I had a friend. His name was Syed, and I won't say his last name out of respect for him, but he was from Pakistan, and he was Muslim, and he said when he was little, he was told the reason why you don't have new clothes is because of the way America has kept them under. The reason why you don't have enough food is because of America. And he said, we were brainwashed when we were kids. It was, everything that's wrong is because America caused it. Yeah. So they're literally fundamentally brought up to hate our country and not even know why. And he said, it was an awakening for him when he came here. He came here as a visitor initially and saw that it was a lie, that America was not doing these things. And he immediately wanted to stay here. And he's been here ever since, God bless him. But it's one of those things where it's like, wow, imagine all the people who are still over there who still fundamentally believe this stuff to the core. And it's sad, really. It's sad. It's like, wow. Like we talked about North Korea in the other episode. It's like these people are it's almost like they're just so far gone that, I almost
living in the Truman Show. They're truly.
Yeah, I almost want to say it's not their fault per se. Everybody has to be accountable for their actions. I don't care who you are, what you believe. You have to be accountable for your actions. And that'll speak for a lot of the stuff that we talk about in future episodes. But every man, every person needs to account for their actions, period. So I don't care if you think it's okay to behead someone because of America, you're still going to have to take account for your actions. And,
Well, and here's where say a kid is born into a country like Afghanistan where education is frowned upon.
Sure.
And basically everyone around you feels this way. And you're taught from the time that you can remember that not only are Asians the scum of the earth, but you should do whatever is necessary to kill them if you have an opportunity to kill them.
Right.
Now, when you're 10 or 12 years old and you're, out playing at the park with your AK-47.
As you do.
As you do in those countries. I'm half joking.
I know.
And, you see an Asian person walking on the street and you shoot them. Are you to be held accountable for your actions? And who, by our standards, is that kid? Do you fault the kid or do you fault the environment within which he was brought up?
Well, a good example would be what was it? We had the Singapore situation where the American kid was in Singapore and he broke a law there, and the punishment.
Spray painted.
Yeah, he broke a law. And his punishment was the Singapore caning, which I think made for a lot of good wrestling stories.
Oh, totally.
After that.
Tommy Dreamer has made a career
right
off of that.
Oh, good old Tommy.
Case in history.
But yeah, so that Singapore cane thing, it was one of those things where if you're in another country and you break that country's laws, you have to take accountability for it. I get it. And I think how that whole situation went down, I think it was interesting. There was a big debate over whether or not he should be punished. We were talking about, trying to get him out of the country. And then there was the Asian dude who stepped up and said, I'll take some of his cane whips. I mean, that to me, that speaks more volumes than trying to take a plane down or trying to, you know what I mean? Or trying to kill somebody. It's like when you take an action of sacrifice, putting someone else above yourself, man, you speak volumes. You really do. And I think, not that we can solve the Middle East, but if we start putting other people's needs before our own, I think we can get a lot more accomplished. I really do.
By other people,
right or wrong.
By other people, who are you speaking of, or who are you referring to?
Well, I mean, I could say, let's see, I could say if the people of Iraq, just the specific groups who are making up these organizations that are, so dead set against America and everything. I mean, they hate Iraq right now because we helped basically reorganize the country. So, everything that we did, they want to destroy. And yeah, if they could just somehow, and I know it's impossible. I mean, you can't change somebody's mind to that degree when they fundamentally believe something. But if people could just entertain the idea of, I don't even know how to word it, man. Just, put other people's needs, higher than your own, man. I mean, it's just,
yeah.
Do you know what? Okay, Israel, Gaza, yeah, there's a tight living space. I get it. Let's, instead of, fighting, let's try to just, exist, man. I know that sounds hippie and rose-colored, but, it's not impossible. But
the thing is that, I think we've got a similar situation going on in Israel and Palestine that you do in Iraq right now, and that is that you've got these different groups that haven't wanted to live in peace and harmony for decades. I was listening to a great podcast by Dan Carlin, who puts out Common Sense, which is one of my favorite podcasts to listen to, besides this one.
Right.
And he basically said that these people haven't wanted to live together since like World War I. World War I, France and Great Britain basically forced them to all live together instead of separating them out into different states.
And as soon as Great Britain and France left, they went right back to war again.
Yeah. And that's what you've got in Israel. I think that the Jews would live in peace and harmony with the Palestinians, but the Palestinians just won't.
Yeah.
And you've got a difference in, I think all religion is BS, to be honest with you.
Mm-hmm.
But yes, there are significant differences between the behavior of Christians and Jews and the behavior of, and I don't want to say a majority of Muslims, but a large enough percentage of Muslims.
I had a conversation with a good friend of mine today about this exact thing. And because, for every bad thing somebody does, there's a bad thing a Christian does as well. But outside of the United States, Christianity throughout the rest of the world isn't very violent. I think if you mix Christianity with America, you'll find a different mix, and I think that there's probably saying more about Americans and how we are as a people, as opposed to Christians in England and Christians in France and Christians in Russia. It's very interesting that Christians outside of the United States seem very nonviolent. You don't hear stories about abortion clinics getting blown up.
Right.
In Europe, you don't hear stories about Christians saying that you can or can't do something because of their political beliefs or whatever. I think that's our American screwed upness.
Mm-hmm.
But at the same time, yeah, I mean, Judeo-Christianity is not nearly the violent. I hate to put the pin on it, like you didn't either, but yeah, I mean, we're not publicly, with the exception of some people I got my eye on in the South, Christians aren't publicly going on television, threatening other nations.
Right, and even as crazy as the Westboro Baptist churches, they're not going around killing people.
No.
They're not blowing stuff up.
No. No.
They're not telling people to do the same. They're not encouraging others to act out violently.
And I don't think there's any Buddhists playing that game either. I could be wrong, but for the most part, I don't think there are. But yeah, so, I mean, there's something to be said there. And again, I'm not saying it's the right religion, it's the wrong religion, because I know how you feel about that. But it's one of those things where it's like, okay.
Well, that's just at its core, I think.
Right.
Yes.
They think they're right.
One is
else
more
is
violent.
wrong. And
one is more violent than the other, but at its core, I believe that believing in things based on the evidence that they all have, that they all share, which is faith, I don't believe that that's a good. I think that ultimately they all end up at the same place, and that you can get Christians to, I mean, you could get Christians to behave in that manner.
Oh, sure. But you can get Americans to do the same thing. And that brings me to Missouri. You know what I mean?
Yeah, let's talk about that.
I mean, Ferguson, Missouri. I mean, you've got people, Christian or not, you've got American civilians who are enraged about the recent shooting of Michael Brown in Missouri by the Missouri police and Ferguson police. And it's, without turning it into that kind of podcast, I don't get the rioting. I don't get the looting. I get the anger. I get the frustration. I get all that. I do. I'd even get the, slight violent uprising from, protesting and just the heat and being pissed off and it's late at night. But at the same time, once it starts getting to the point where you're breaking into stores and stealing things, what is that?
Yeah, and I guess I don't understand.
I don't care if the cop was 100% in the wrong. I don't care if Michael Brown was 100% in the wrong. What's with breaking into stores and stealing stuff? I think this is an excuse for criminals to act out and be violent and that
try to get more free shit.
Yeah, and that, to me,
these are people that don't want to. They don't want to conform.
But is that the silent underbelly of our people, of our American race? Do you know what I mean? Like, is that the and I'm not going to call it, a specific race. I'm saying American race because I don't care what color your skin is. I've seen all different types of people do that crap.
Yep.
And it's like, what is that? What is that in our core that just makes us go, oh, it's havoc in the streets. No one's minding the store. Let's go steal crap. I don't get that.
Well, it basically, from what I've seen, all evidence points to the idea that the cop acted in self-defense, or, I heard today that he actually had his eye socket smashed by this guy.
I don't know anything. Anything. That's the story that the police were telling.
Right.
And then there were supposedly some witnesses who were telling similar stories, and then other witnesses who were telling completely different stories. It's hard to say what the hell is going on.
So the story that I heard was that this guy was walking down the street. What was the guy that got shot?
The original guy, Michael Brown?
Michael Brown.
Yeah.
So Michael Brown was walking down the street with a friend, and he was walking in the middle of the street. The cop pulled up behind him, said, "Hey, move it over to the side." At which point, the guy started yelling expletives at him. F you, this, that, the other thing, whatever.
Yeah.
That cop apparently just pulled it over to the side of the street. Didn't continue, just let it go. Pulled it over to the side of the street, and then he got a call saying that this store had been robbed. It was a strong-arm robbery. Basically, the guy that he saw in front of him fit the description. So he pulled up alongside him again, at which point, I guess Michael Brown bum rushed the car, tried holding the door closed or slammed the door shut on the cop. They ended up struggling, fighting. He was punched in the cop was punched in the face several times. Michael Brown reached for his gun.
Right. I heard that story too.
He ended up running away, at which point the police officer yelled, "Freeze," and Michael Brown apparently turned around and at some point, for whatever reason, decided to bum rush the police officer, at which point the police officer put 6 rounds into him.
Yeah.
And the last round hit him in the forehead and dropped him 2 to 3 feet in front of the cop. Now, based on that count, if that's me and I'm that cop, I can't say that I would have acted any differently.
Sure.
If that's in fact what happened, then we can only take the I guess patchwork of eyewitness testimony, and eyewitness testimony is the worst kind of testimony or worst kind of evidence.
Yeah, the best kind of evidence is the stuff that we're starting to slowly get now when people are catching everything on their video cameras and things like that.
Because people can see things people see things, I can stand across the street from that incident and you can be standing right next to me and we're going to have two completely, there's a strong possibility that we're going to have two completely conflicting stories.
Well, it's predisposition. If you're feeling, bad for the cop and I'm feeling bad for Michael Brown, we're going to have immediate different positions on what we perceive as transpiring between two completely different people. And I mentioned to you before we started that there was another thing that was released today where a guy had his video recorder on his phone going and the cops shot somebody down Tuesday. And like 4 blocks away from where Michael Brown was shot. And now what blows my mind about the situation is, again, right or wrong, I'm kind of like, really, guys? I mean, with all this going on, you're going to do it again? Is it safe? Although, again, there's that whole aspect of, with everything going on, high tension, what's up? I get that. I wouldn't want to be a police officer right now. I totally get it.
Yeah.
But, they went through this with Rodney King in the 90s, and they went through this with Trayvon Martin.
Yeah.
It's tough. We put these people in a position of authority to uphold the laws that we vote on, allegedly. And it's, is there an abuse of power? I don't know. That's definitely a topic for another day.
Well, I think when, in the case, and I haven't seen the video that you're referring to today, but
I think I gave it to you on your account there, so you can take a look at it afterwards.
In fact, that guy was standing well out of reach of the police officers, and they claim that he only had a knife in his pocket, and he had his arms up. And if that in fact is the case, that's murder, just plain and simple.
Well, and it gets into so many different things, man. But let's call it a day on this one because an hour and so here, an hour and change, and I definitely want to come back to this. So let's come back to that. We'll talk about a little bit more about Missouri next time, and we'll talk about the rights of a police officer in relation to the rights of an American civilian, because there's a lot we can talk about with that. But hey, give us an email, pushthebuttonpodcast@gmail.com. You can also go on our Facebook page where you can see where Ken did the Ice Bucket Challenge. Awesome. You on iTunes because we love it when you do. And, the Middle East is jacked up right now, man. I don't know what to do.
It really is. And just before we go here, I guess my question, I keep going back and forth on this, is we're going to continue to stay in Iraq and meddle and stir that pot, then we got to go all out. We have to go all out. Or
say what you're not saying, man. What do you mean all out? Are you saying we got to nuke the place?
No, I don't think I think that's just. I think that's a horrible option. I think that caught. There are some good people over there. There are some very good people over there.
Yeah.
And I think we need to. I think we have the technology, and maybe I am just naive and think that American military technology and superiority far exceeds that of the rest of the world. But
it's pretty much
videos that I've seen and testimony that I've heard from members of our military and our armed forces, I think we have the technology to figure out in what general locations these people are, and we need to go in there and we need to strike. We need to strike hard, fast, quick. You know, one of my favorite books is called the 48 Laws of Power, and one of the laws in there is basically, paraphrasing, decimate your enemy completely, or your enemy's going to remember.
Yeah.
And he's going to be pissed off about it. And he's going to plot, and he's going to plan. And someday, when you least expect it, he's going to come up, he's going to rear his ugly head, he's going to bite you in the ass. Yeah. And he's going to kick your ass. So I think if we are going to do something, we need to go out there and decimate them completely.
Yeah.
I don't think you do that by going house to house and knocking on the door. Are you a good guy? Are you a good guy? Boom.
Yeah.
So that's all I have to say.
I'm inclined to agree with you. The only problem is how do you decipher between good guy and bad guy? You know, do you get the good people out of there before you boom?
Yeah, I don't know.
And that's the hard part, and that's why we're stuck. But that's why we have intelligence, and yeah.
We'll have to have somebody on who knows a little bit more about military intelligence and this kind of stuff. We can ask them those questions.
Yeah, I think we could definitely do that. All right, everybody. Well, thanks for tuning in this week. We will catch you around the flip side. As usual, Ken reads books, and he shows his knowledge.
You should, too.
You should, too. Read books. They have words. And from the Push the Button podcast, I'm David Vox Mullen.
And I'm Mr. Anderson. And listen, just chill out, take a pill, drink a cup of coffee, pour some chamomile tea, and don't get hot.
Hey, can you push the button?
Do not touch that button.
Hey, can you push the button?
Do not touch that button.
Hey, can you push the button?
Do not touch that button.
Mr. Anderson.
Don't push it.